Hi, everyone. This talk is called Secrets of CSE. I thought about some other titles for it while I was preparing it. I was like, we should have called it 10 Things That CSG Don't Want You to Know, ... Number 3 will leave you stunned, because apparently my talk is the BuzzFeed of CSE. So clearly you all came here for the insider gossip. You all wanted to know, like, when are we moving to hexamesters? Like, what's the password to get into all of CSE servers? Where do they keep the secret solution that proves that P equals NP? And all these questions will be answered in another talk. That's not why we're here today, unfortunately. So what I have to say is that obviously we're not here for me to tell you stuff on behalf of CSE. Oh, that's a good question already. CSG are the people who run the computer infrastructure at CSE. They sort of look after the servers and the computers and that sort of stuff. That's a good question. Yes, these are all my opinions, my thoughts. Please don't sue me is basically the summary of that. So the question is then, well, why did you turn up? Clearly, everyone should just go home. You're not going to get all the interesting answers. What I want to do in this talk is to show you sort of 10 practical tips, tools kind of stuff that you can use to work on projects and up your productivity. They're all the sorts of things where they're available on CSE. Some of them are more specific to CSE, whereas some of them are like, you could do it anywhere, but it's just really handy to know on CSE computers. And I've tried to structure them in such a way that like the first few are really general, and you might even say like, what's the relevance here to CSE? And the last few are like more particular, and they're like, you're only ever going to come across them at CSE. So hopefully there's stuff in here that people don't already know. If you've got questions, or if I move too fast, or if there's something I mentioned that you're not sure about, I'll jump ahead to here. Yep. If there's something that I mentioned that you don't know, please feel free to ask questions. I'll be watching the chat and I'll jump through questions as we go. I kind of want to have this like be a tutorial kind of vibe, though of course it's a talk, but like ask as many questions as you want. I'd also really encourage you to get up your computers yourself and try these tools. They're all the sorts of things where I've tried to make it easy to like copy the files that I'm working on, and then you can use them so that you can play around with the same stuff. So definitely I'd recommend like playing around with it. And if you run into errors while you're trying to play around with it, you can ask me questions in the chat, or alternatively, I'll stick around at the end and I'm happy to chat to people then. I am going to try and move reasonably fast. And the idea is that like I'll give a lot of links here where you can go and look at stuff later, so you'll sort of know what the word means and you can look it up later. But if you want me to slow down and talk about something more specific, let me know. I do have to remind everyone that like some of these tools are things that let you make stuff public on CSE. So for instance, you can make a website that people can see. If you do that, that is covered by like the UNSW rules about, like be a good person and don't like, sell drugs or whatever. So make sure that you know what those rules are and that you follow them. It should be reasonably obvious, but I have to say that anyway. Let's talk about what the tools are really quickly. This is the list of tools. If you're looking at all of these and saying, yes, I know every one of those, Tom, why did I come? Now would be a great time to leave or stick around, because there might still be stuff in here that you don't know. We'll sort of talk through them individually. I don't want to like give you a summary now, I suppose. In terms of what I'm expecting from you, I would imagine that anybody who's a 1511 student or graduate at this point will be able to understand this talk. You may get more out of this talk in certain parts if you've done 1531 or 2041, and I'll flag the points at which that experience would be useful. But if you don't have that experience, don't worry. Hopefully most of the stuff will make sense. And yeah, again, please ask questions if something doesn't make sense or I move over something you're not sure about. In case you don't know who I am, my name's Tom. I'm a third year CSE student. I was on the CSESoc exec. I'm a STU rep. I'm the course admin for 1511. My details are here. This link doesn't work yet, but I'm assuming that at the end of this talk, all of my stuff, which will be published on GitHub, will be available. So if you're watching the presentation, that link should be there. Cool. So let's get started on some actual stuff. This one is a pretty easy one. I think a lot of people may know about it already, but I wanted to mention it because it is really useful and sort of crucial to all the other stuff that we do. SSH, or the Secure Socket Shell, I believe is what it, or Secure Shell, I think is what the acronym stands for, is a way that you can connect from your computer to another computer. And it's really useful for us because it means that we don't need to use VLab to get into CSE servers. I can get a terminal on CSE servers without needing to use VLab. So the question is then, well, how do I do it? On pretty much every operating system, Windows 7 and before, you may not be able to do this without some extra technology. But you can open up a terminal. Here's my terminal. You can type SSH. You can then type in your ZID, so 5205060. Then you say @ and then login.cse.unsw.edu.au. We do this. We wait a second and hope that it works. And magically, my login shell on CSE pops up. So this is the same thing that you would see if you opened up your terminal in VLab. It's kind of handy. The reasons this is useful is maybe you want to like jump in and quickly check something without opening up a terminal. So it's handy to know about. Cool. I'll give you a bit of CSE specific details. In CSE, there are 3 servers. If you go to try and log in to login.cse.unsw.edu.au, there are 3 possible servers that you'll get taken to. One is called Weber, one is called Williams, and one is called Weil, I think is how you say this. Actual CSE Insider thing, you'll notice that every server, it has a weird name. They're all named after composers in the same way that all the labs are named after instruments. So there's a sort of theme going on. So there are a few other specific servers I'm going to mention, one of which is Corelli, which is the server that is used for if you're connecting with VS Code. I'm not going to talk about connecting with VS Code, but there's an article that I published about a week ago. I'm happy to link it to people if you're interested in using VS Code. VS Code actually uses this SSH tool that I just showed you. It just does some extra stuff on top to make it look really nice. The other server is called Williams, and Williams is a server that we use for long-running processes. So like the main example I'll give later in this talk is cron jobs. We'll talk about them later. That's a good example of where you'd use Williams. The handy thing about this is not only can I SSH from my computer to to CSE's computer, I can also SSH within the CSE computer system. So for instance, I can go from Weil to 5205060 at Williams. I could say .cse.unsw blah 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 at the end, but this will get me in. I can do this, and you'll notice that if we wait a second, I now show up as being logged in on Williams. And I can use the exit command to get out of that. But that's a handy thing for jumping around within CSE, especially if you're doing some of the trickery that we'll be talking about later today. Cool. In general, SSH is really, really common. You'll find that pretty much every IoT device supports SSH or something else like Telnet, similar. You'll find that pretty much every server that people run will have an SSH daemon running that lets them like connect into it and check stuff, which is really handy. You'll notice a theme. I tried to find XKCD comics for like every single point in this talk. I couldn't find them for all of them, but mostly I could find some. So SSH is something that you will use in the real world, and it's handy to know about. One bonus thing, I've got my phone here. You can actually install an SSH client on your phone. I use one called Juice SSH, which is for Android. Clearly, all of you are in the situation where like you're at a party and you're trying to impress someone, and like obviously the choice that you're going to make to impress somebody is to pull out your phone and show them your latest 1511 assignment on your phone, clearly. And this is how you can do that. So you can log into SSH from your phone and profit, I suppose. That's a handy, useful extra tip.
Quick question about, sorry.
Yeah, please.
Question about the domain names. So I've been using, to get into CSE over SSH, I've been using just CSE.unsw, so on and so forth.
Yep.
What's the difference between that and the login domain name or subdomain?
So the login domain is, I think, like if you try and log into cse.unsw.edu.au, it will redirect you automatically to login.cse. Okay. So there shouldn't be a difference, except it's possible there's a slight speed delay because of the redirect there. I'm just saying login.cse because that's like officially what's published, I think. But trying to log into cse.unsw will get you to the same place.
Cool, thanks.
Sure. Here's some further reading. So if you're sort of thinking, oh, I want to learn more about SSH, one of the things you can set up is that you don't have to type in your password. You'll notice that when I SSH'd into Williams, and even when I SSH'd into the login server in the first place, I didn't need to type in a password. That's not because my account is unsecured. That would be crazy if it was. The reason why is because I've set up this thing called an SSH key, which lets you have a file with some secret stuff, and the secret stuff proves to the computer you're logging into that it's actually you. It's way more detailed than that, but I don't want to sort of go too far into it. Juice SSH, I mentioned, that's for getting in on your phone. And if you're on Windows and you can't use the SSH command, the PUTTY is a program that you can use. Cool. That's number one, SSH. Number two. All right. So we jump into SSH, and you'll notice that I had this cool Hi Tom banner. If you did 1511 anytime since the start or middle of this year, maybe since the start of this year, I think, you'll probably recognize this as being a banner from the 1511 message of the day command. If you're not from 1511 in the last year, you might have no idea where this is coming from. This is one of the exercises that we do in the first week of 1511. But there's a little bit of trickery that we pull on you here. We tell you run this command and it'll all get set up. But the question is then, like, how does this get set up? How does it appear? Here's the answer. There's a file called bashrc. Here's that file. And inside this file, we put in to the file a command that says, show your message of the day. And you might be saying, what does this file do? Why do we use it? Basically, before you run your terminal, everything in this file gets run. So for instance, if I was to put in here something that said, print out hello world, that will get run before every time I start my program. So in the language that this is written in, which is a form of shell scripting, which you'll learn in 2041 if you've done that, you can say echo, and that's the same thing as printf. And so I could say, for instance, echo hello world here. If I then exit and then log back in, what we'll see is that hopefully, if I haven't messed anything up, it'll say hello world, like it does here. So by itself, that's kind of cool because you can customize your terminal a little bit. You can get a message to pop up to give you some inspiration, to tell you that you're awesome. But there are actually a few other things that you can do with it that make it extraordinarily useful. In order to set it up, there is one little gotcha, which is that you may need to put these 3 lines of text into your bash profile, which is another file that may or may not exist. It's a little bit complicated. There's a lot of history going on here, but these are all configuration files for your terminal. And they all get run at slightly different times and do slightly different things. So if putting something into bashrc by itself doesn't work, you may need to add this piece of code into your terminal. I'll give you all a second to take a photo of that or to write it down if you'd like to. The only thing to be aware of here is that you need to have a space between the open square bracket and the dash, and then the C in the closed square bracket. But if you copy this text, and I'll probably make a file with this available in a little bit, you can then type whatever you want into bashrc and have it work effectively. The other trick you can do is you can type source ~bashrc, and this command basically means reload my bashrc command, or my bashrc file. So if I do this, we'll see that here's what my prompt would be. It's really handy for, like, if you change something and you want to test it, you can just type in source bashrc and it'll automatically test it for you. So awesome. We know how to set it up, and you might say, well, cool, I can print stuff out. That's really awesome, Tom. Why did you show me that? There's actually a lot more that we can do than just printing stuff out. So the first thing that I've written down here is your path. So path is the name of the list of folders where you can execute commands without needing a /. So if you've done 1511, you're probably familiar with this idea that, I'll make a file called bird.c. Wait, do I have a bad one? I should have some files in here. That's way too many files. Kangaroo.c maybe. Yeah, I do have kangaroo.c. So here's kangaroo.c. It's broken. Actually, I'm not going to try and fix this up now. I could DCC this file, -o kangaroo.c. It's going to fail to compile, but apart from that, then I could theoretically run /kangaroo. And that's kind of cool, but why am I able to run DCC without saying /DCC? The answer is not because DCC is some magical special thing. It's just because DCC is stored in a special folder, a folder that we've told our computer, if I type in the word DCC, go and look here to find out where the program is. The handy thing is that you can influence which folders are special like that. So if I go into my bashrc, you'll be able to, for instance, run this command, which says export path being the list of places to go and search for files that can be run. Path equals path. So i.e. everything that was in my path list already, keep it there, but then add on 2 other folders, local/bin, which is where I keep all of my files, and then /bin, which is the files that I'm going to be writing today. So let me do that. Chmod, mcdir bin exists. I can jump into bin ls. So here's a bunch of files that are already in my bin. But if I wanted to add something, let's say hello world, this is a program called hello worlds. I'm just going to write this quickly. Bin bash echo hello world. So this is just written in the same language as my bashrc file. I can then chmod that. We'll talk about this in a second. And now, if I reload source, to make sure that it has in fact been sourced. Where is it? Yep. So if I do this now, I should be able to run hello world. And I didn't need to type /. This is really handy because you can start making utilities for yourself. You can write yourself even like a C program that maybe tells you what your to-do list is for the day, or that it gives you like a quote whenever you log into your server. So these are all like simple things where you could use this and you could actually make a small program and get a little bit of practice in. The next thing to talk about here is running commands on startup. I've already basically shown you that because that's what 1511 does. When you log into your terminal, we run this show message of the day command, and that shows whatever you've designed your message of the day to be. That's kind of handy. The next thing that you can do is aliases. Aliases are awesome. Alias does exactly what it sounds like. It says, whenever I say this one thing, actually do this other thing. So alias is a command to mean something else. There are 2 aliases that I've defined here. The first one is called mkdir. You may have recognized this command and be like, hold on, that's already a command. That means make a directory. What this alias does, though, is it says, whenever I say mkdir, please actually run the command mkdir-pv. So for instance, thank you, Clifford, for the suggestion. I can mkdir tom. And because I had that -v thing, it tells me that it's created a directory. So I get this feedback about like, oh, yes, it did actually create a directory. The p command means that it doesn't give me an error when I've already got that directory that exists. So if I run mkdir tom, it doesn't say, hey, that directory already exists, I couldn't create it. It'll just create the directory for me. That's one handy thing. I've got another one here, which is just sort of to stroke my ego. So I can type Tom and be like, clearly an awesome guy. So if you want that sort of self-encouragement, you can make yourself an alias where you just type in your name and it says something nice about you. How great is that? So aliases are awesome, but sometimes they're a little bit too simple. So there's another thing that you can do where instead of using aliases, this should say functions. So just like how functions work in C or any other language, you can define a series of steps that are each composed of commands. So for instance, here is a command that I like to call mkcd. And this is one of the commands where I'm like, I wish that everybody had this. Because what this says is make a directory and make the directory $1, which means like this is the first argument to your mkcd command, and then cd into that directory. So if I type in mkcd test directory, what this is going to do, it's going to make mkdir test directory, and then it's going to cd into test directory. And you can see that immediately my directory has changed. So I went from being in my home directory to being in the test directory. Now, that might not seem like a lot, but if you're making directories and files all day, it is like a significant time saver. So would thoroughly recommend having something like that in your bashrc. What's the next thing? So just so people know, as a reminder, the function here, when it says $1, that just means the first argument. So you can make it take as many arguments as you'd like. Again, if you take Comp 2041, you'll learn a lot more about how this language works, and you can do even more powerful things like processing text with it, or taking any number of arguments and doing something cool. So that's kind of handy. Yes, you can recreate Git with it. Absolutely right. I also made another a bash function to stroke my ego. This one didn't need to be a function, but I just wanted to make one. So if I run awesome Tom, it says, Tom, you're awesome. Now, apart from the fact that that didn't work, let me quickly change it so it's using colors. Let's now edit that on the fly. So those variables were wrong. It should have said C red. If I now source my bashrc to update the changes that I just made, and then I run awesome Tom again, now it says, hey, Tom, you're awesome, but it says it in red. Ooh, fancy. So this is another thing that you can do with your bashrc. You can start to configure colors. You can see that I've got two colors set up here, one of which is red, and the other one is a color called reset. It's not actually a color, it just says like turn off whatever colors I put in before. In the slides, I've got a link to the list of all of the colors that you can do. That's really cool because it means that you can start making fancy messages that do nice things. You'll also notice here that I'm using this export thing. Export is basically like defining a variable. So if you type something over and over and over again, and you wish that you could type it in a shorter way, you can export a variable. So you say, for instance, export T equals Tom is the best guy ever. I'm really making myself sound like I'm sort of trying to up myself, but no. If I do this and then I source bashrc, now what happens is if I say echo $T, the dollar meaning this is a variable, so it distinguishes it from me actually just saying echo T, it'll say Tom is the best guy ever. Cool. So I think that's the list of everything. Yep, awesome. So just to summarize, oh, actually, there's one other thing I haven't covered yet. Oh, no, I'll cover that next. So summarize, we can add commands here. So we can add a call out to another command, or we can use the echo command, which means print out something. We can make exports, which are like variables to shorten what we're typing. We can make aliases, which are basically saying, if I type this short command, make it into a longer command. You can make functions, which are the same thing as variables, except a little bit more same thing as aliases, except a little bit more powerful, so you can have arguments to those and all that sort of stuff. That's left over. The question was, what's Accio meant to do? That's left over from an old project of mine. Don't worry about it. Cool. So the other thing that you can do that's really awesome is that you can customize this thing here. So this Z5205060 at Wagner with a little tilde in the middle, that's actually my, we call it a prompt. It's the thing that pops up before you type every command. Now, normally, this is set by default to be either a $, or in some other browsers, it'll be like your entire path and then a colon. So it'll tell you like where you are. But there's actually so much more that you can do with it than just saying my username and where I am. So I want to show you that to you now. The way that you do this is by, in your bashrc, you export a thing called PS1, and then you give it a series of different like special codes, and the special codes will create your prompt to be a certain way. Now, it'd be nice if those special codes were really obvious, but they're not. So the other thing I'm going to point you at today is this prompt generator, which is about to pop up on your screens. There we go. You can read up on the documentation to do more advanced things, but if you just want to play around with it yourself, what you can do is you can you drag in, for instance, I want it to show my working directory. So you click working directory, and then you say, I want it to show my working directory, but in green. And then at the end, you'll get given this output, and you can copy the output, paste it into your bashrc file, and it's going to change what your terminal does. So, for instance, I could change this variable. So instead of printing with square brackets around where I am, it could print with curly brackets, let's say. Let's do that. I'll source my bashrc again. And so now, instead of having square brackets, it puts my path in curly brackets. That's obviously a really simple edit, but you could do much more complicated things like make it show what time it is, make it show what your Git status is, make it show all these different things. Cool. So we'll get to that. That's really handy. We use it a lot within CSE. If you see people around with fancy editors, that's probably what they're using. They're using a variant of setting their PS1. In the real world, this sort of scripting and aliasing is very, very common. It's a subset of what we call bash scripting, which is like the little glue that holds the whole universe together. Like there's an unconscionable number of like random scripts that like if this script doesn't run, the bridge will fall down because somebody somewhere made a hack that like did this thing and it just keeps working. So there are lots of applications for this. And like I said, if you want to learn more about it, go and see Comp 2041. I should ask, are there any questions so far? And Kai has a great point. You can even make an alias for source bashrc. I have one on my home computer. On my home computer, I use Zush reload, and this is the same thing as me saying source bashrc. You can set up an alias like that. I don't have one set up on CSE though. Any questions?
So export, the export command, that's anything put in there that will show up in, for instance, if you have the env part of the main function on C, that'll show up in there, right?
Yes, yes, it will.
The environment.
Yes, it will.
Cool.
Mostly, it should do. There are weird cases in which it doesn't get passed down to child processors, but it should get passed down. Yeah, awesome. So that's editing your bashrc. What I'm going to do now, actually, I'm going to make this public bashrc. So if you want to play around with my bashrc, what you can do is you can run, I'll type this in the Zoom chat, cp space tilde tfpk/.bashrc, and then copy it to somewhere. So if you run that command, you'll be able to copy my bashrc and edit it to do whatever you want. I might also get rid of that Accio thing so you're not confused about what it's doing. I'll get rid of that. Awesome. Cool. So you can copy that and be able to play with it while the rest of this talk is going on. Let me know if anyone has trouble copying it over. I think I've set it up correctly. One other thing to note is that the real cool kids use a thing called ZSH instead of bash. ZSH is just like a newer version of bash. Bash is actually a newer version of another shell, so there's sort of long history. You can use a thing called omyzsh. You can use a thing called power level 10k, which Shrey, who I believe is in the call, wrote a nice write-up about getting. These are all handy tools that just let you make the customization of your terminal easier. It's a real rabbit hole where you like start learning about it and then you're like, I want to do this simple thing. And then it's like 3 days later, you learn how to do the simple thing with like 50 lines of code. So be careful that you don't do this when you've got an exam or an assignment coming up, but it's a really interesting thing to explore. Cool. Third thing, this is another really simple thing that I wish we talked about more. They're called Readline Bindings. And what they do is they let you use keyboard shortcuts to move around your terminal faster. Why would you want to do this? It makes you look cool, I guess, but also it does actually add a lot, like it's a lot faster to type in a keyboard shortcut than to hold down the left key for 30 seconds to get from the end of your terminal to the start. So I'll show off all these terminal prompts. I'll shuffle these readline bindings. The first ones are Control A and Control E. So if I type out a long thing here, Control A will take me to the start of the line, and Control E will take me to the end of the line. You can think of A as like the first letter in the alphabet, so that goes to the start, and then Control E will take you to the end. And yes, I'm assuming that you haven't modified your settings so that you're using some other mode, but pretty much everyone starts off in this mode, so this should work. You can also use home and end. They'll do the same thing if you've got a long keyboard, but some people don't have long keyboards and all they've got is Control A and Control E. Next thing, Control R. So Control R is super useful. Control R lets you go back in time and see previous commands that you've run. So for instance, if you're like, I want to go back in time to when I was sourcing my file, I can type Control R. It'll say reverse iSearch, which means it's doing a search backwards, like up your history. And then I can say source. And you'll notice I've typed in sour and it's already found that command. And I can press enter and it'll run the command. Or I could have also done a left or a right, and it'll like fill in the command, and then I can go and change stuff about it. So that's really, really useful. It may not always work on some Windows editors, but there are weird places where it does work. Like sometimes on Firefox, I can get it to work. So that's really handy. Another one. Control W. Yes. Control W deletes a word. So if you're like, I just want to delete the entire word, don't hold backspace for 10 seconds, just press Control W. What else is there? Control Z. Okay, so this one isn't a readline binding, but I've lied to students about it so much. I don't want to say lied. I've like not told the full story about it so much that I wanted to like come clean and tell you the truth. I didn't want to keep any secrets from you all. In 1511, you may have seen a lot that we do something like get it ASDF .c. I only didn't type ASDF because I think I've got a file in my home directory called ASDF and I don't know what's in there. Ampersand. So we all know, we use this thing, and when we press it, it'll open up, hopefully open up, oh no, it won't open up an editor. It'll open up my get it editor, but I'm able to keep using my program. We just say that that's the way that things are, but it's worth noting that there's a reason that things work that way. The reason is because if I run get it ASDF BF blah ampersand, what that says is run this program in the background. So if I then, trying to think of a good command I can run in the foreground. Let's take, there's a command called sleep. Sleep just like waits for a while. So it's handy for demonstrating long running processes. If I want to sleep for 2 minutes, this is just going to like stall my program for 2 minutes while it's waiting for me to, while it like waits 120 seconds. But let's say that I like want to do something else while my computer is sleeping. What I can do, I can press Control Z. That means suspend my program. So it'll put it in the background and stop it. And then I can run either FG, which means put it in the foreground. So it'll take up my screen again. Or I can run BG, which means put it in the background so I can keep on working. This is so handy, especially if you're in 1511 or 2521 and you use get it. If you forget to add an ampersand to the end of your command, you can just press Control Z and then BG, and that will then put your program in the background and it'll be like you pressed ampersand. So that's a handy thing to know. What else is there? Yeah, cool. So, yes.
So what's the difference between Control Z and BG?
So Control Z is, I've got my program running here. Control Z is suspend my program. So Control Z gets you to the state where the program is not running and you can type stuff into your command, into your terminal. If I then type BG, that means keep running the process, but run it out of sight. I don't want to see it. So this will keep sleep running, but it's just running in the background. It's not doing anything. Does that make sense?
Yep, cool, thanks.
Cool. And then FG is the same thing, except instead of stopping the process and putting it in the background, it'll it'll restart the process and put it in the foreground, like as in it'll be on your terminal. How many processes can you put in the background and be accessible through BG and FG? That's a really good question. The answer is that I think you can have more than one process running in the background, and that the way that you do that is you say like BG and then a number. But the best way for me to tell you this is if I run manf. Can I do that? Nope. The best way for me to do this would be to Google it. So I'm not sure about the exact numbers of programs. I usually only find that I've got one program running in the background, but it comes up sometimes. Thank you, Shrey. Apparently it's BG or FG with a number. But if you're running into that problem, well, then you need to learn about tip number 4. Oh, and I'll note that often, like if you're using Python, you can use the readline bindings in Python. You can use it in the SQLite editor. You can use it in other places. And the readline bindings actually come from Emacs. So if you really, really want to like dive deep into something over the uni holidays, learn Emacs. It's a massive learning curve, but it's kind of like Vim except older, and you can feel superior to Vim people, as you can see in this XKCD comic. Damn it, Emacs. So number 4, tmux. What is tmux? Tmux is a terminal multiplexer. So what is tmux? tmux is a tool that lets you turn one terminal into multiple terminals. There are a few reasons why this is really useful. The first one that I would give you is because if you want to do something like putting processes in the background, but you actually want to have like two processes running at once and see what they're both doing, you can split your screen using tmux. As well as that, if you're working on CSE, if I start a tmux session now, so I'm inside a tmux session, which is a bit weird. But if I'm set here, if I now sleep 120, so this is going to run for a while. If I then leave that session and exit my connection to CSE, and then I reconnect to CSE, making sure that I connect to the right server. So this doesn't work if you connected to Veil the first time, but then this time you're connected to Wagner. So we have to explicitly say, I want to go into the same server I was just in. SSH into that server. Then I should be able to tmux attach session -t0. And I'm back in the same session I was in before. So it persists even after I've changed connections. Now that is super useful for like, if you're working on something and you've got the terminal set up just the way you like it and you've got some commands, but then your mom's like, come to dinner, honey, or whatever. And then you have to like shut down your computer. You can then come back after you're finished eating dinner or whatever and continue working. So this is really, really handy for that. It also is something where it rewards knowing all of the keyboard shortcuts. So here is a list of keyboard shortcuts. You type Control-B and then one of these shortcuts. I'm going to demonstrate this by using, oops, that was unintentional. Ignore that. Cool. So I'm going to demonstrate this in my regular tmux session. So you'll notice that here I'm running a tmux session. This tmux session is controlled by my computer, not by SSH. So for instance, I can type Control-B and then % to do a vertical split. So if I do that, I've now got two terminals running, one on my home computer and one on my SSH connection. Alternatively, I might want to remove this this screen, and so I can do Control-B-X, and it'll kill the pane. So it'll kill that little part of the screen, so I can keep working somewhere else. It's got this sort of like window tab style system, so I can say Control-B-C, and it'll create me a second tab almost. And then I can go Control-B1 to go back to the first one, or Control-B2 to go to the second one. There's way too much about tmux. I could do an entire talk on tmux by itself, so I'm not going to talk about it more than that. Just to say, tmux is really useful. If you learn the shortcuts, it can be really, really helpful and make it a lot easier to use SSH as your primary way of connecting to CSE. So very handy. We also use it often for long-running processes. So for instance, Hopper, which is the service that runs all of our help sessions, that runs inside of a tmux session because we want it to keep running. We also use it a lot when we're marking, because marking, for instance, if we're marking 1,000 students, there's one process that's going to last like 6 hours. So we run it in tmux, and then we can just leave it running. And even if my computer dies, it'll still be running in the background. So that's really handy. In the real world, this is not the right slide, but oh yeah, but we do use it a lot on the command lines, and we'll run like REPLs and stuff. Cool. One warning with this though, there are a few warning slides about this talk. Don't leave your tmux sessions running on servers unintentionally. Like, it's fine if you leave it because you wanted to come back, but if you're just running it there because you're leaving it behind, you're creating a lot of like clog on the server that's going to have to like, we're going to have to go in and delete it, or it could mean that people, if they want to restart a server, that they have to like check, are you doing any work? So it's best not to leave tmux sessions running. So the way that you close a tmux session is if I join this session, if I type in exit, and this is the only screen that's running inside of this tmux session, it'll close the session. That's just a useful thing to know. Awesome. Okay, almost halfway there. So next thing to talk about is public HTML. What is public HTML? It's a way of accessing files from your CSE account from outside your account. Why would you want to do this? There are lots of reasons, but the best one that I can give you right now is to share programs with your friends. So before we do this, I just need to do a quick refresher on how permissions work because they're really important for the next few elements of this talk. So permissions are basically a way of you saying, well, if I'm the user who wrote this file, I get to choose who sees this file. It would be terrible if everybody could see, comp1511 final solutions.txt. Only the comp1511 group should be able to see that. Alternatively, you might want that everybody can see your awesome project. That would be cool. The way that this works is a bit of an arcane system, but there's a special series of codes that we use to designate whether something is readable, writable, and executable by a certain person. So there are three types of person. There's a person who is the user. That is like if I'm logged in my account, I'm the user. There's the group, which is like a way of saying me and all of my buddies can be together in a group and we can have access to something, but nobody else. And then there's the world. So the world is like anybody. And what you have to do to figure out what the permissions of something are is you say, well, for the user, I'd like the user to be able to read, write, and execute my program. So that means I'm going to need to give the user 4 + 2 + 1, so 7. I'd like my group to be able to read my program and execute it, but not to write to it. So let's say this is like you're showing it to all your friends, but you don't want your friends to be able to edit your program. Cool. And then you don't want the world to be able to do anything with it. So none of these three, so you'd say 0. So the permissions for the file would be 7, 5, 0. That is 7 meaning the user can do everything, 5 meaning the group can read it and execute it, but not write to it, and 0 meaning the world can't do anything with it. So how does this apply? You'll notice a second ago that I just ran a command called, let's find the command, Control-R, chmod, here's the command. And what I said was, change the permissions of my file, that's what chmod means, such that the file bashrc has permissions 644. Can anyone tell me in chat, what do we think that those permissions mean? I'll give you a second to look at the page as well. 644, what's that going to do? I'll wait in chat until people can think about it. So the user can read and write, absolutely. What about the other people? Yeah, so another way of expressing it is RW dash, R dash dash, R dash dash. So the user can read and write, the group can read but not necessarily write, and the world can read but not write. As an example, if I was to change the permissions here from 644 to 640, and one of you now tried to copy my bashrc, you wouldn't be able to. So that's a really handy trick because it means that you can say, I want everybody to be able to access this, or I don't want anybody to be able to access this. Sorry. So now that we're hopefully happy with permissions and we have this idea of, well, I can tell a file whether I want it to be visible to the world or not. What I can do is I can make a directory called public HTML. This is a special name that's sort of common across the world for this kind of directory. So I'm going to use my mkcd alias or my mkcd function to jump into this directory. I already have quite a lot of stuff in here, random stuff. So I'm not going to cover all of it. But once I've made this, I can also chmod it. So make sure that this directory is 755. So public HTML. Cool. So I've done that. And then I can open a file in my favorite text editor. So let's say that I'm going to write myself a C program, cprogram.c. You could open this and get it if you wanted to, include setio.h, int main void printf please work ... You have to ask the demo gods to make things work, otherwise they'll take vengeance on you. Here's my simple C program. Let's say that I want you guys to be all able to see my C program. What I do is I then chmod that program 644, so you should be able to read it and write it. Oh, sorry, you should be able to read it but not write to it. Then you can go to all of your friends and you can say, hey, did you want to see my C program? You should go to /web/5205060/cprog.c. And so all of your friends can now open up /web/5205060/cprog.c, and they can all see that too, hopefully. you should all be able to see that as well. I could also, for instance, then compile this program, dcc-o cprog.c. I could, yeah, be careful. Don't put code that you don't want to be public in public HTML. This is like the same thing as sharing it with your friends if you put it in public HTML. Well, I suppose you could put it in public HTML and then give it permissions of 600 so nobody else can see it, but that would be kind of silly. If I now set the permissions on cprog to be 755, that is, you should be able to both read it and execute it. Now you should all be able to run /web/52050/cprog. If you run that command, well, and handily, you'll be able to run my program. This is really handy if you've got like a setup script that you want other people to be able to run, or you've built a script to install something. You can say, hey, do you want to install this program? Just run this command. Obviously, you could also do bad things with it, but please don't do bad things. Please run my cryptocurrency miner here. But that's also a possibility that's really useful. So within CSE, you could also have typed something out like home 5205060 public HTML cprog. The reason that I'm suggesting that you use public HTML is because it's got a really fast way of accessing it, because /web/your_ZID/the thing is a really fast way of getting to the right place. You'll notice throughout this talk sometimes that I talk about TFPK. My account, I also am able, instead of my ZID, to be able to use TFPK because that's my sort of handle. But you could equally use Z5205060, the same thing. So there's nothing special going on there. Cool. So in the real world, this doesn't come up as much. If you work in like a big organization that has a Linux installation or a Unix installation, or if you work in another university, you'll see this is pretty common, but it's not common in the real world as much anymore, unfortunately. Only staff are allowed to get handles, and even then, you have to apply and stuff. Anyway. Where to next? Yes. So we've already seen, yes, Shrey has posted the link, that there is a way of accessing files from the web. Sorry, we can access from within CSE. But now, what we can do, as Kaikui has kindly pointed out, I can actually access this from the web as well. So I can share things with my friends. You'll notice that you may not be able to, I'm not sure if you can go to that link directly and download. It'll download the file. So the first thing that I can do is I can go in and edit index.html. This is a special file. The index.html file is basically like, it tells your computer what to do if I just go to, hold on, let me move this here. If I go to Z5205060 with nothing else, the index.html file is the one that gets shown. So let's set that up. Usually this would just redirect to my other website, but let's put something more interesting in here. Let's make it say H1. So H1 means header. Hello, CSESoc. I hope this is useful. H1, and then I can save that, and then I can make sure that permissions are set correctly. So 644 index.html. Awesome. Now, if I go to this directory, I get shown this cool thing. Another thing that I'm able to do with this is I can also set it up so that there are certain settings on the pages that I show. And the best example of this is if I jump into secrets/06, which is here's something I made earlier. If I go to .htaccess, do I have an htaccess? No, I don't. Where do I have an htaccess? Top sneaky. So here's a file called, a directory called top sneaky. It also contains an index.html. But if you go to 5205060/secrets/ 06_web/top sneaky, you'll notice that to log in, you actually need to enter a password. So you can set this up with a .htaccess file. The file that I've used is here. So you basically say, here's the message that you should say. You should say it's only CSE users, and then you can turn on authentication and require that they be a valid user. You can also, for instance, require that the person be a specific user. That's kind of handy. The other thing that's really handy is that I will often use in my teaching a folder called live code. And what I can do in here is the htaccess basically says for .c files, show them as plain text. So don't download them, just show what they look like, which means that if I go to live code here, I can see a list of a bunch of stuff in this directory. Let's say that I want to look at I want arrays.c. Now I can see my code. So this is a really useful way, especially if you're a tutor, you can share your code. If you're a student, you can still share your code, but I suppose don't share code that's like in your assignments and stuff. That's kind of handy. If you want to get the file, I'll show it again. That's exactly what you need to type in your .htaccess. Cool. Awesome. So this is the one that requires authentication. The add handler will let you like serve up C files as text. They're both quite useful to use. I'm going to mention quickly, as well as this, that there's also more interesting stuff you can do where you can turn this into a fully fledged website. If I go into secrets and then I go to 07 site, which should be here. Secrets 07 site, like that. Here is a full HTML, JavaScript, CSS. It's a website. This is from a previous talk that I gave about using Vue. So if you want to learn more about this specific stuff, you can look at that talk. It should be on YouTube, I think. But you can add in extra JavaScript and whatnot to make a fully fledged website and even a really simple application. Useful things you can do with this. You can have like a set of links to all of your like study notes for a subject or to all the pages for a subject. You can have a list of links to like important UNSW links. It's a simple project, but it's so useful to have like a home page that you can go to and be like, I want to go to a certain place. There's a question, can you deploy React apps in public HTML? Yes, you can. You can absolutely deploy React and Vue apps. I have a few Vue apps that are deployed in production right now using that. So, awesome. I'm going to stop again and just ask really quickly, are there any other questions? Anything else that people want me to answer? Anything else that I can talk about? Quick question about Bash. Absolutely. Please ask me a question. Cool. Why does 1511 colors override the bashrc file? Why does it not override it? It used to override it. What it does now is it should just chuck in another command. The reason why is because we don't want to edit your file in case you've made changes yourself, because it's possible that it would like accidentally write something over. The other reason is that we can like we can change that and it will change it for every student. Because you're using our program, we can like change one thing and everybody's will get changed. It's handy from a teaching perspective, but from a technical perspective, you could also just append into the file if you wanted to. There's not really much of a difference. Does that answer your question? Oh, and also Abraham asked, can you add a C name? I don't think so. I don't think so, but possibly. To check what they look like, you could run 1511 colors. If I source.bashrc now. So here I've sourced it. If I wanted to, if you could try it out and then you could undo it by editing a bashrc and removing this code here. Oh, it is appending. It's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to add in a command somewhere else, but that's fine. So you can try it out and you can edit your bashrc to remove those files. Any other questions? Nope. Awesome. Cool. So moving on. Number 8, Cron. Cron is really, really useful. And I think that there are a lot of cool projects that are reasonably simple if you know about Cron. So what is Cron? Cron is a way that you can run something regularly. You can say every hour on the hour, I would like you to run this program. You can use it for things like cleaning up your program. So let's say that you're like, I'm always leaving around those, my .c files. I don't want to have any .c files in my account. You can say every hour, remove every .c file from my account. Be careful with that one, obviously, but like you could do that sort of thing where you continually, for instance, delete files or move stuff. The example that I've got here, and for this example, I'm actually going to jump into Williams. So remember, we mentioned earlier, Williams is another server for longer running processes. I like to keep all of my cron stuff on Williams because it is specific to which server you're running it on. Just like how tmux only works on the server that you're working on, cron only works on a specific server, the server you set it up with. So let's log into Williams. In order to edit on cron, you say editor equals vim or gedit or emacs or nano or whatever. So editor equals vim and then cron tab -e. This then shows you a massive comment. And then I've written in some 2 functions here. The bottom one is one that I've added to demonstrate what you can do with cron. So this one here is going to download the file comp1511 from the timetable website every single hour. And what it's done is it's dumped those files into, where is it? History should be. TFPK. Nope. Let's find it. Should be here. Excellent. So here is a list of files that it's downloaded. And so every time, a few more students enroll or whatever, maybe this is going to tell me when they've enrolled. So I've saved all of the information about who was enrolled where in 2021. There's lots of different stuff you could play around with this. You could constantly download information. You could constantly upload information. There's a lot of room to maneuver here. The one thing that's a little bit weird about cron is how you specify frequencies. It's got this weird system of like, you have 5 numbers. The first number is which minute it happens on. The second number is which hour it happens on. The third number is which day of the month it happens on. The fourth number is which month it happens in. And the fifth one is which day of the week it happens. And star just means every. So this is saying, this one here says every 13th minute past the hour, every day of the month, every day of the week, run this command. This is I'm happy to share this command with people afterwards, but you could equally make this just like a C program that you wrote or a Python program that you wrote. To figure out exactly what the command is, you go to crontab.guru, which is again a link that's in the slides. You can use this to figure out exactly what your expression means. So if I say 13 star, that means at minute 13 of every hour. This is just a handy site you can use to do that. Awesome. That's cron. So within CSE, we use it a lot to like run jobs every hour, to do auto marking or to do random different stuff that's kind of handy. We also use it for caching websites occasionally. I've got some stuff set up that like downloads a website every day and tells me whether something's different. Yeah, we'll email students if they haven't had it in their labs. That happens on a cron job. In the real world, people don't use it as much. It's kind of outdated. It still gets used in some places. It's certainly like scary when there are like, big systems that rely on cron working. But it's even on your local computer. So if you want to set up a job on your own Mac or your Linux computer, you should be able to do that, which is kind of handy. And again, a warning here, make sure that you clean up your cron tabs after you stop wanting them. So if you run cron tab -r, it'll remove the cron tab, and anything that's there won't happen anymore. So that's a good, useful tip. The second to last thing I wanted to talk about was cron mail. Cron mail is a thing that lets you, you have a cron job. So you have something that runs every hour. If that job outputs something, if it prints something or it does anything like that, you actually get an email saying, hey, here is what your job said. So I'll give you an example of that. We're going to add a new job. It's going to happen on the 8th minute past the hour, every day of the month, every day of the week. And all it's going to do is it's going to print out, hi, Tom, your cron job is ready. So I'll save that. We'll need to give it a minute, but in a minute's time, what we'll see is that we'll get an email saying, hey, Tom, your cron job is ready. Or we'll get an error. That's the other option. But if there's an error, it's probably because I haven't written something correctly. So cron mail is, again, really useful. There's lots of stuff you could do here about like setting yourself reminders or like getting an email every day to tell you, what your to-do list is for that day. There's a lot of cool projects that you could work on here that rely on cron happening regularly. If you want to get into with Python as well, there's a lot you can do with like download this page and look at what the page says. And if the page says something, then send me an email. So that's another really handy trick that you can use. I'm going to stop here and ask if there are any questions again, because we'll wait for that email to come through. Any questions? Anyone curious about stuff? It's a good question. I can probably make them public mostly. I'd be happy to do that. I have an entire for my home computer, I have it set up so that I have a bunch of files that like sort of are in a tree. So I have a specific file for setting up Vim. Well, not Vim. I have a specific file for setting up tmux. I have a specific file for setting up connecting to CSE, stuff like that. I also have an application which is public called CSE, which is like you can install it on your computer, and then instead of typing in so instead of typing in SSH, all I usually do is I just type in CSE, and it'll automatically connect me to the school. And that's basically an alias. It just does some extra stuff as well. But I'm happy to look into making my dot files public. Cool. It's 8 minutes past the hour. I'm just about to go through CGI scripts. Yes. That is thing number 10, actually. We'll just wait until the email comes through. Very excited. Any other questions while we're waiting? Let me just check the cron tab. Where is it? Excuse me. Sorry. Can't find it. Yep, so it should have sent it 8 minutes past the hour. Did it send it 8 minutes past the hour? Possibly not. I wonder what happened. Let's try and set it up to send it 10 minutes past the hour again, just to prove that it does work. Let me check my other email as well. Dum-dee-dum-dee-dum. Cool. Is it here? Ah, there we go. Yep, cool. So here's an email from Perfect. It says, hi, Tom, your cron job is ready. And you could set that up to be something more interesting. You could set it up to, tell you the weather. You could set it up to tell you, I don't even know, man. Like, you can do anything. That's the wonder of programming. Awesome. So thing number 10. Very exciting. CGI scripts. This was foreshadowed. So going back to the public HTML directory once again, cool. If I jump into, where's it going to be? Secrets /10. Awesome. So one of the things that we can do is we can actually have dynamic ways of creating a page. So all the page is just some text, right? It says, here is the heading that I would like you to say. And then you print out the heading and it shows up on the page. But the handy thing is that it doesn't have to be like an HTML file that does that. You can write yourself a program. For instance, here's my program. It's called mybrowser.c. You print out these magical 2 lines, and then anything that you print becomes a web page. So, for instance, instead of saying printf here, I could say printf, %d, and then do some mathematical calculation. I could print out, I don't know, the state of the computer that I'm logged into. I could do some complicated whatever. So let's see how this works. In this case, I've got my C program. I've already compiled it. I've compiled it to be called mybrowser.cgi. So if I now go to mybrowser.cgi, is that not going to show up? Nope. Okay, I have to go to it manually. So secrets 10 web mybrowser.cgi. Oh, what did I do wrong? Oh, it's called 10 CGI, not 10 web. Let's fix that. Cool. And now this message got printed by a C program. I use a C program here because I knew that everybody would be able to use one. But you can actually set up more complicated things. Like you can set up a Python program that deals with things like if you go to a different path, it'll print out something different. I've written entire applications that the school has previously used that just used CGI. What I'll do is I'll point you at my website. I could go through in more detail how to write these websites. The only issue with me going through it in detail is that there's just so much to talk about. This is sort of an abbreviated version of the instructions I gave you. There are some special htaccess rules that you should probably use that will set it up so it all works correctly. And then you can build using Flask. Here's a sample Flask program. You can build yourself a full functioning website. So I can have routes and I can render a page based on what's in the route. So if it says hello name and the name is Tom, it might print out hello Tom versus printing out hello Jack or hello whatever. There's lots of information around Taggy, which is like the CSE wiki, has a bunch of information on its page about setting up a CGI script. And with this, you can build a full application. So before we saw that we could host HTML files, which would let us make front-end applications. So if you wanted to use JavaScript and do maths and stuff, that would absolutely work. But now you can also build applications on the back end. So you can have calculations, you can even have databases. I mentioned in the sort of title of the talk or in the description of the talk, you could even use SQLite, which is a database. So you can build a full application. I actually did a hackathon where I just used this for hosting. It's not perfect. There are some weird intricacies, and certainly it's good to play around with it first before you use it in that situation. But I'd strongly recommend playing around with it because you can set up full-fledged websites and you don't need to pay a cent. That's the really nice thing about this. If you wanted to, you can go and get an Amazon instance and set that up, but you have to pay money and you have to figure out how that works. Whereas this, it's given to you as being a CSE student. All it is just, you put some files in the right place. Cool. One final warning on this, which is that CGI scripts are programs, which means that they can do anything that a program can do. For instance, a CGI script can run rm-rf and delete all of your files. There's one safety precaution, which is that a CGI script isn't allowed to access any files outside of public HTML. So that's to make sure that if somebody hacked into your CGI script, they couldn't access your home directory. But certainly anything that's inside your public HTML directory is fair game and could be accessed by anyone. So make sure that you're careful about, not putting ways of getting hacked in there. It basically never run a CGI script that lets the user type something into the terminal. So if there's ever a point where something that the user has written could be put into a terminal, that is a potential spot where your CGI script could cause problems. Yeah, to do, don't get hacked. Absolutely right. Cool. I've already spoken through this. You can copy from, I should say, web/tfpk/secret/10web. Oh, that link is actually wrong. That's an old link. Let me fix that. You can copy from here. So web/5205060/secret/10cgi/mybrowser.cgi. I'll post that in chat just to make sure that everyone's got it. And I'll update it for people watching the talk later. You can copy from that directory and you can start playing around with CGI scripts. Cool. Go forth and hack. Bunch of cool stuff. Hopefully you've had some ideas now where you're like, oh, I could use that piece of technology to do something interesting. And unfortunately that I couldn't answer all of the true secrets of CSE. Unfortunately, they're going to have to wait for another time. But I hope that everyone here has learned something. I hope that you've all had the chance to see some cool stuff. Any questions?
What your Vim instance, what plugin did you use to get the line numbers be relative to the current line number?
That's a setting in Vim. Rel line, I think it's called. You set line and then you set like relative line, or set relative maybe.
Oh, okay.
Abram says set RNU. That sounds
okay.
Right.
Thanks. Thanks, guys.
Sure. No, I explicitly didn't cover any CSE specific commands. I can actually talk about malalias if you want. I'd be happy to talk about that. Oh yeah, you can get live temperature data for digital labs. That's true. And yes, the recording will be on the YouTube afterwards, so you can come back and take a look at it. Since somebody mentioned malalias, I'll talk about it. If you are interested, you can Google CSE MLALIAS. This is a tool that lets you create custom emails. You can read through all the commands, but I'll talk through what the steps are. Let's say I want to make a new email address called malalias-c 5205060.secret talk. You're only allowed to make email addresses that start with your username. So you're not allowed to make something that's just called, like head of school at CSESoc at CSE or UNSW. That would be kind of bad. But you can make them that start with your username. So this will create an email address. You can then add people to the address. So I'm going to add myself. And then I'm going to add. Who am I going to add? Can somebody give me a ZID in chat and I'll add that ZID? Okay, 5308310, I think was it. That's terrible typing. I'm just going to choose the one that's at the bottom. 5259232. That's a nice ZID. So if I say z52060.secret talk, if I now send an email to that to z5205060.secret talk at cse.unsw.edu.au, you'll be able to email both me and Michael. This is really handy for group projects. So I actually have a malalias right now called 4920, which is for my 4920 group project, which has the group members for that project on the list. So if any one of us emails anybody else, you automatically get access to all their emails. I hope that they didn't mind me publishing their emails. That's probably fine. Cool. That's a handy command. I can mention ACK as well, I suppose. ACK is a command that lets you tell who somebody is. So for instance, I have a ZID in my head, but I don't remember who it is. I think it's Zach. Yeah, okay, fine. 9300162. This is Andrew Taylor. There you go. And so you can see name and position and ZID, which is handy. Yes. Don't alias it to docs. That makes it sound very creepy. There is a there are some commands to do that sort of stuff. I know that there's more than one command that lets you see where people are. I don't have them in muscle memory though. And also presumably I don't want to give more tools for people to start, stalking. So any other questions or any other points? What keywords? I use Cherry Browns. Yes, it's extraordinarily loud. That's why my mic is in this position, so I can. Hello. Now my keyboard sounds less loud. Hopefully. I'm not going to get into a discussion about which keyboard switches are the best. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can stop recording presumably at this point. I can stop recording, in fact, and I might stop sharing too.
Hey, Tom, I might have missed that. Did you say there was a talk that you can deploy SQLite 3 into public HTML as well?
You can. You have to be a little bit careful with it because there's actually there are concurrency issues. So if you're doing stuff that's big or that you want to be very reliable, once you get to the point where you're running a service for more than 10 or 20 people, you probably want to start thinking about deploying it properly. But you can use SQLite inside your public HTML. It's just like using anything else, just like writing to a regular file.
Yep. Cool.
In fact, if any of you use the CSESoc Discord verifier, that runs on CGI, and that uses it used to use SQLite in the backend as well. So there's lots of different places where there are random CGI scripts lying around that are kind of handy. Awesome.